Every family has a tree. Its roots run deep, anchoring us to our past, giving us a sense of identity, of belonging. We cherish the stories of the branches that came before us, the faded photographs, the half-remembered anecdotes, the names whispered with love and reverence. This history is our foundation. But some family trees have roots that are rotten. Roots that are wrapped tight around a locked box, a hidden grave, a terrible truth that was buried deep in the earth for a reason. We all have a natural desire to know where we come from. But some secrets are not just skeletons in a closet. They are active, dangerous things. Truths so devastating, they have the power to poison the entire tree, from the deepest root to the newest leaf. Tonight, we are unearthing 4 true stories of people who dug into their family's past. They went looking for answers. But they found a horror they could never rebury. These are 4 terrifying, true family secrets that should have stayed buried. Our first story is about a wound a family simply could not heal, and the monstrous deception they embraced to cover the scar. It begins in 1994 in San Antonio, Texas. A 13-year-old boy named Nicholas Barclay, a troubled but loved kid, was playing basketball with his friends. After a disagreement, he stormed off. He called his mother to ask for a ride home, but she was asleep. He was never seen again. For his family, his mother Beverly, his older sister Carrie, and his brother Jason, the disappearance was a living nightmare. Years went by with no answers. The police investigation went cold. Nicholas became a ghost, a missing face on a poster, a permanent, aching void in their lives. Then, 3.5 years later, in 1997, the family received a phone call that seemed like a miracle. A boy had been found in Linares, Spain, huddled and terrified in a phone booth. He claimed to be their long-lost son, Nicholas. The story he told authorities was horrific. He claimed he had been kidnapped by a sophisticated child trafficking ring, flown to Europe, and subjected to years of unspeakable abuse before finally making a daring escape. The family was overcome with emotion. Their son, their brother, was alive. Carrie, Nicholas's sister, immediately flew to Spain to bring him home. When she saw him, there were discrepancies. The boy who claimed to be Nicholas had brown eyes. The real Nicholas had blue. He spoke with a strange, thick accent he attributed to his time in Europe. He seemed older, more world-weary. But the family, desperate for their miracle to be real, explained it all away. The trauma had changed him, they said. His eye color must have changed. They embraced him, brought him back to Texas, and welcomed him home. Nicholas Barclay was back. Except he wasn't. The boy they brought home was not Nicholas. He was a 23-year-old French-Algerian man named Frédéric Bourdin, a deeply disturbed con artist who would later be nicknamed the Chameleon. Bourdin was a serial imposter who had spent his life assuming false identities. After being found in Spain, he had contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, found the file on Nicholas Barclay, and decided to become him. Bourdin lived with the Barclay family for nearly 5 months. He slept in Nicholas's bed, wore his clothes, and listened to stories about a childhood that wasn't his. The entire time, he was terrified he would be exposed. He dyed his hair blonde to match Nicholas's. He got tattoos to mimic ones Nicholas had. He studied the family, learning their history, perfecting his role. But a local private investigator named Charlie Parker, hired by a TV crew working on the story, was not convinced. The physical differences were too great. Parker's suspicion grew with every interaction. He eventually managed to get a court order for the boy's fingerprints and a DNA sample. The truth was finally exposed. Frédéric Bourdin was arrested. His elaborate deception brought to an end. But this is where the story turns from a tale of a brilliant con man into a truly dark family secret. Bourdin's exposure didn't bring closure. It unearthed a much more terrifying possibility. During his interrogations, Bourdin made a chilling claim. He said that the reason the Barclay family had accepted him so easily, despite the obvious differences, was not just because they were hopeful. He claimed it was because they knew the real Nicholas Barclay was dead, and they knew what happened to him. Bourdin alleged that soon after he arrived, he began to realize the family was hiding something. He claimed that he believed Nicholas had been murdered and that members of his own family were involved. His sudden reappearance, he believed, had terrified them, and they had played along with his charade to keep their own, much darker secret buried. The police investigated Bourdin's claims. They re-interviewed the family. Suspicions fell on Nicholas's older brother, Jason, who had a history of violence and died of a drug overdose shortly after Bourdin's deception was revealed. An uncle had also told police that he believed Jason had killed Nicholas and that their mother, Beverly, had helped cover it up. But with Jason dead and no body ever found, the original case remains cold. The secret was not that an imposter had infiltrated a family. The secret the Barclay family may have been hiding was the murder of their own son. Frédéric Bourdin, a master liar, may have stumbled upon a truth far more terrifying than any lie he could ever invent.
No one escapes the curse.
Our next story is about a secret that isn't an action, but a biological time bomb passed down through generations. It is a horror encoded in DNA, a genetic curse so terrifying, a family chose to suffer in silence rather than speak its name. This is the true story of fatal familial insomnia. Imagine not being able to sleep, not just for a night or two, but forever. Imagine your mind, desperate for rest, beginning to fray, to hallucinate, to decay, while your body remains trapped in a state of perpetual, agonizing wakefulness. This is not a fictional horror. It is a real, incurable, and always fatal genetic prion disease. Our account comes from a man who pieced together his family's hidden tragedy. We'll call him Daniel. Growing up, Daniel knew there was a shadow over his mother's side of the family. He watched several of his great-aunts and uncles, and later his own uncles, wither away in a bizarre and terrifying fashion. It always started the same way. Around middle age, they would begin to complain of insomnia. Then came the panic attacks and phobias. Their personalities would change. Soon after, they would begin to hallucinate. Their bodies would tremble with strange, jerky movements, and they would descend into a state that looked like dementia. From the first symptom of insomnia to their death was always a period of about a year. When Daniel would ask what was wrong, the family would fall silent. They would whisper about a family curse. No doctor could ever give them a diagnosis. The deaths were attributed to everything from nervous breakdowns to early-onset Alzheimer's, but none of it ever fit. The family refused to discuss it further. The secret was to be kept. Then, Daniel's own father, who had married into the family, began to show the signs. He was in his early 50s. It started with sleeplessness. He would pace the house all night. Then came the profuse, unexplained sweating. Then the panic attacks. Daniel watched in horror as his strong, rational father began to unravel. Determined to save his father, Daniel began a desperate genealogical investigation. He became obsessed, digging into old family records, death certificates, and forgotten hospital archives. He mapped out his family tree, documenting every relative on his mother's side who had died of the curse. He discovered a terrifying pattern, going back centuries. An ancestor from Venice in the 18th century had died of a mysterious sleeping sickness that sounded identical. From that man, the curse had branched out, silently carried in the blood, felling a relative in nearly every generation. He took his research to a team of neurologists. After months of tests on his father, they finally gave him the answer. His father and all his deceased relatives had fatal familial insomnia, or FFI. The secret finally had a name, and the name was a death sentence. The doctors explained the horrifying nature of the disease. A mutated prion protein in his father's brain was destroying his thalamus, the part of the brain that regulates sleep. His brain was literally forgetting how to sleep. There was no cure, no treatment. The progression was unstoppable. Daniel watched as his father wasted away, his mind lost in a waking nightmare of hallucinations and dementia, his body finally shutting down from sheer exhaustion. But the horror didn't end with his father's death. The doctors then delivered the final, devastating piece of the secret. FFI is a dominant genetic mutation. This means that any child of a carrier has a 50% chance of inheriting the disease. Daniel now knew why his family had kept the secret. It was a truth so monstrous they couldn't bear to speak it aloud. To tell your children that you may have passed on a 50-50 chance of dying, one of the most horrible deaths imaginable, is a burden almost too heavy to carry. Daniel now lives with that secret. He is in his 40s. He has the option to get tested, to find out if the genetic time bomb is ticking inside of him. But he has chosen not to. He prefers to live with the uncertainty rather than the terrifying confirmation. The secret, once buried by his family's shame and fear, is now his own personal waking horror. Some family secrets are not found in medical records or historical archives. Sometimes they are buried right under your feet. Our third story comes from Long Island, New York, and it's about two brothers who decided to do a home renovation, only to unearth a family mystery that had been cold for nearly half a century. This is the story of the Carroll family. In 1961, George Carroll, a 34-year-old Korean War veteran and father of 4, vanished. One day he was there. The next, he was gone. His wife, Dorothy, told their children that their father had simply left. She said he packed a bag and walked out, abandoning them. The children grew up with the pain and confusion of that story. Their father was the man who had deserted them. For 47 years, that was the family truth. The children grew up, had families of their own. The old family home was eventually passed down to one of the sons, Mike Carroll. In 2018, Mike and his brother decided to excavate the basement of the old house. For years, they had been told by their mother that the basement held a sump pump that never worked and that it should be left alone. Now, with their mother having passed away years earlier, they decided it was finally time to fix the foundation. With the help of a friend who was a paranormal investigator, who had long suspected a supernatural presence in the house, they began to dig. They dug through the concrete floor into the hard, packed earth beneath. They dug for hours, and then their shovel hit something. It wasn't rock, it was bone. They kept digging, their excitement turning to cold dread. They unearthed a nearly complete human skeleton. The police were called immediately. A forensic investigation began, and through DNA testing with Mike and his siblings, the identity of the remains was confirmed. The skeleton in the basement was their father, George Carroll. He hadn't abandoned them. He had never left the house. He had been murdered and buried in a makeshift grave under the basement floor, a secret kept for almost 50 years. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head. The family secret was not one of abandonment, but of murder and concealment. And the investigation into who was responsible led to a horrifying conclusion. There was no sign of a forced entry. The person who killed George Carroll was someone who was already in the house. While there was never enough evidence to press charges, the family and investigators came to believe that the prime suspect was their own mother, Dorothy. The story of their father walking out was a lie she had concocted to hide her crime. The broken sump pump was a story to keep anyone from digging in the basement. Every member of the Carroll family had lived their entire lives on top of their father's grave, completely unaware. The person they had loved and trusted, the mother who had raised them, had been harboring the darkest secret of all. The discovery brought a certain kind of closure, but it was a horrifying one. It replaced the story of an absent father with the story of a murdered father and a mother who was likely his killer. For the Carroll brothers, digging up their basement didn't just uncover a body. It unearthed a truth that was far more terrifying than the ghost they thought was haunting the house.
We are chosen.
Our final story is about a secret that corrupts the very idea of family itself. It's about a young woman who slowly realized that the loving, supportive family she belonged to also belonged to something else. Something secretive, powerful, and dangerous. This story is a composite of several true accounts from those who have escaped high-control groups and cults. We'll call our narrator Jessica. Jessica grew up in what she thought was a normal, loving, upper-middle-class family. Her parents were charismatic, intelligent, and well-respected. They belonged to what they called a philosophical society or a personal development group. To Jessica, it just seemed like her parents' quirky social club. But there were strange rules. There were certain neighbors and school friends she was subtly discouraged from spending too much time with, labeled as negative influences. Her parents would often host late-night meetings in their home with other members of the group, and she would be sent to her room. Sometimes, they would leave for weeks at a time for seminars at a remote compound owned by the group. As a teenager, she began to notice the language her parents and their friends used, strange, coded phrases about clearing the planet, achieving a higher state, and following the teachings of their enigmatic founder. She found books in her father's study filled with bizarre cosmology and strict, controlling doctrines. When she asked questions, her parents' answers were vague and evasive. They told her she wasn't ready to understand yet. The secret began to unravel when she went to college. Away from her family's direct influence for the first time, she began to see how different her upbringing was. She started researching her parents' society online. What she found horrified her. She fell down a rabbit hole of testimonies from ex-members. The group was not a philosophical society. It was a notorious, high-control cult. The articles and forums she read were filled with stories of financial exploitation, intense psychological manipulation, forced disconnection from non-believing family members, and horrific abuse. The charismatic founder was a convicted con man. The loving community she had known her whole life was a carefully constructed facade, designed to isolate its members and control their every thought. The secret wasn't just that her parents were in a cult, it was that her entire life had been a product of it. Her approved friends, her private school, her family's wealth, it was all tied to the organization. She was not just a daughter, she was a second-generation recruit. During a holiday break, she decided to confront them. She laid out the articles, the testimonies. She begged them to see the truth. But her parents didn't react with shock or denial. They reacted with a calm, pitying disappointment. They told her she had been corrupted by outside sources. They explained that these attacks were proof of the group's importance. They then revealed the final, horrifying piece of the secret. They told her that her time in the outside world was over. It was time for her to come home, to dedicate her life fully to the group, to marry another member, and to disconnect from her negative college friends. It was not a request, it was an expectation. The family she loved was now looking at her as a problem to be solved, a dissenter to be brought back in line. The love she had always felt from them was now revealed to be entirely conditional on her compliance. The horror Jessica discovered was the realization that she was a stranger in her own family. She was an outsider who didn't share their core fanatical belief. That night, she packed a small bag, left a note, and fled her family home. She knew that by choosing reality, she was choosing to lose her family forever. The secret she uncovered forced her to bury the family she thought she had, and to accept the terrifying truth that she had been raised by loving, kind, intelligent people who were also willing, devoted members of a destructive cult. An imposter son, a genetic curse, a hidden body, a secret society. 4 stories of truths that were buried for a reason. They teach us a chilling lesson. that the most devastating secrets are not kept by strangers, but by the people who are supposed to protect us. They are the cracks in our foundation, and sometimes, when you shine a light into those cracks, you don't find closure. You find a darkness that swallows everything. Every family has secrets, but some are darker than others. What do you think is the most terrifying secret a family could keep? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you appreciate these deep dives into the unsettling truths of the real world, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content that explores the darkness. Thank you for watching.
Prince of Darkness.